Hello friends, it's Alora. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be filming my July wrap-up. I'm actually really proud of myself this month because in July I read a total of 12 books. I know. So to avoid having the never-ending video, let's just get right into it. The first book that I read in the month of July was The Crane Wife by Patrick Ness. This novel combines Japanese mythology with present-day London. The main character, George, is just a regular old middle-aged man living in London, living his life, when all of a sudden in the middle of the night this beautiful white crane lands in his backyard and is keening because it has an arrow stuck through its wing. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars because I felt like the writing had the perfect amount of enchantment tossed in to mix up with the mundane real world. This book also combined this aspect of making art out of old books, which I found to be really fascinating, and I just overall enjoyed learning more about Japanese mythology and hearing more of Patrick Ness's amazing writing. The second book that I completed in July was also a 5-star read for me, and that was Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, a graphic novel by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. This is so good. This graphic novel follows the story of Freddie, who's a high school girl in love with this other girl named Laura Dean. Laura Dean, however, is not a very compassionate person and keeps kind of stringing Freddie along. This is the story of a very toxic relationship and how it affects other aspects of Freddie's life, such as her friendships. I thought that it was so well done. It was really beautiful. The artwork was just phenomenal. It's black and white with a touch of pink, which lends itself well to drawing the eye to certain areas in order to highlight what's going on in the scene. Overall, this is amazing LGBTQ+ representation and just a really beautiful story of friendship and of being in love and of heartbreak. After that, I read Little Beach Street Bakery, which is the story of a woman named Polly who has just gone through a huge upheaval in her life. She's gone bankrupt. The business that she and her boyfriend had created basically goes up in flames, and her relationship also goes up in flames. So she decides that instead of trying to immediately find a new job along the same lines and continue life as per usual, she is going to escape to a little coastal town. So Polly moves to this little island town that's connected to the mainland by a causeway that is oftentimes covered over by the tide, and she rents this little tiny attic apartment that's really decrepit and awful. It's the story of her basically trying to get her feet under herself again. The story incorporates a lot of baking, which is really fun as I also love to bake, and was cute. Overall, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it was fun. It passed the time. The fourth book that I completed in July was Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. Foundry Side has a kind of complicated plot, but essentially it's the story of this thief who has a very special ability. When she touches an object, she can know everything about it. She can feel what it feels, she can feel its past, and this is really good for her and also really bad for her. Essentially, at the start of the book, she's tasked to steal this very important object, but she has no idea what it is. It turns out that it is an ancient artifact that is sentient and has this unimaginably phenomenal power. This theft is the catalyst for her getting sucked into all of these court politics, different factions essentially trying to gain control of the entire government of the city, different people trying to use her for her ability, different people trying to get the artifact. It's a very complicated plot. If you like books that take place in kind of a futuristic urban city setting with thievery and plots like that, then this might be the book for you. If you get easily confused, this might not be the book for you. I personally didn't enjoy it that much because I felt like I was always struggling to keep up with the new plot development that was happening. It felt like the book kept up-leveling. Originally you thought the book was one thing, and then the book decided to be something else, and then it decided to add another level. And this can be a good thing, especially in a series, because the first book is really the world-building book. It's setting you up to understand what's going on in the world system. However, if you're looking at it as a book isolated, a book on its own, it was kind of confusing and it was difficult to keep up with. That's definitely a controversial opinion, as a lot of people really love this book. So overall, I think I gave this book about a 3.5 or 4 stars. That was just how I felt about it. After that, I completed The Bullet Journal Method by Ryder Carroll. The tagline on the front is "Track the past, order the present, design the future." This book details the bullet journal method, which is a productivity method for organizing your life, trying to figure out what it is that's important to you in your life and only tracking those things. This is a book that's interested me for quite some time, as I've seen various videos on bullet journaling and had been intrigued, both by the streamlined aspect of it and the creative aspect of it. So what I like about the bullet journal method is that you can really combine the two. You can take the very simplified version of the method, which is just beautifully streamlined, and then you can add to it if you so choose. You can add collections, you can make it artistic, you can add drawings, you can do whatever it is that you choose. I really like this method and have been using it for the past month or so and have really found it to be quite useful in my life. So overall, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. After that, I read another graphic novel called The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This is the story of a young prince who clandestinely hires a very wonderful seamstress in order to make him dresses, because the prince likes to dress like a woman. In this kingdom, that is absolutely taboo, not something that can be advertised whatsoever, and so he has this secret friendship with the dressmaker who's making him all of these gorgeous gowns, and then they go out on the town together as two women enjoying shows, movies, galas, things like that. I really liked the aspect of friendship in this story. It was very sweet and great representation too. It was really fun to see all of the beautiful gowns, but I didn't really like the color scheme because it was kind of muted. Definitely something that you can fly through. I read this in probably about an hour and a half. Overall, it wasn't my absolute favorite, but I would definitely recommend it. The next book I read was an interesting one, and that was Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami. This book was originally written in Japanese and was translated into English. It's the story of a 38-year-old woman who happens to stumble into one of her old high school professors in this restaurant that she frequents. They get to talking, and then they develop this really interesting and unique relationship where they just meet up when they happen to be in this restaurant at the same time. It's a story of two people who are lost in their lives and lonely, coming together and developing this really strong bond. I thought that it was lovely. It was very unique, very different. I really enjoy seeing how different cultures communicate different ideas and concepts. It's personally been a goal of mine to read more translated literature, so I checked that off with this novel. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Another plus is that it's really short, so it's a story that you can consume in 1 or 2 sittings and really feel quite satisfied with at the end. After that, I listened to the audiobook for Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This is a book that I've been hearing about for quite some time, but never have actually gotten around to reading until now. This is the story of a high school girl who has been studying for her entire life in order to get into a prestigious university, but she's always felt a little bit off in her friend group, like she can't truly be herself. She feels like all of her friends see her as this study machine, as this person who is completely and 100% devoted to school and has no other interests, where she actually has this other very intense interest in a webcomic series, or it's less of a webcomic and more of a online podcast. At the start of the book, she meets a boy who's also really interested in this podcast, and they start to develop a friendship from there. She starts to truly be herself, wear her wacky leggings, and love what she loves in front of other people. I thought it was a lovely story of coming to terms with who you are and showing up in the world as that person. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I finished another audiobook. This one was A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahara Mafi. I love Tahara Mafi's writing. I really enjoyed the Shatter Me series when that came out, and then I also really enjoyed her middle grade series. She has this way of writing that's just so whimsical and engaging. Anyhow, this is the story of a Muslim girl post 9/11. Our main character has been moving around with her family every year or two, never really settling down, never really making solid friendships. And at the start of the story, it's the year after 9/11 happened, and she's experiencing a lot of racism, a lot of microaggression, a lot of xenophobia, and to be quite frank, she's angry about it, justifiably so. She feels like people are degrading her for her race, for her religion, and she is absolutely not okay with it. However, at the start of the story, she encounters a boy who's really interested in her, and he seems interested in who she is as a person versus her ethnicity or her religion. The story also features breakdancing, which is something I've never read about. That was absolutely a fun element. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought that it was a very important perspective to hear from, and was a lovely story of two people coming together from completely different perspectives and trying to learn about one another. The character development in this book was a major plot point as Shireen, our protagonist, began to soften and allow herself to see the good in people not just the bad that she expects. After that, I finally finished City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is a book that I have been reading for what seems like forever, since it came out. It's a story of showgirls in the 1940s. It's a story of liberation and a story of independence, of moving to a big city on your own, of making friends, of having affairs, and it was really fun. Elizabeth Gilbert wanted this book to be enjoyable. She wanted it to have that flair of theatricality, and it really did. You really felt the setting. Personally, I didn't love the main character. I didn't love some of the choices she made, but I think that that was part of the story. It was seeing a character grow, seeing her make these decisions, some of which were bad decisions, and then having to live through the consequences of those decisions, but still living through the consequences of those decisions. Nothing was world-ending. It was just life. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really still love Elizabeth Gilbert's writing style. I think that she has a way with words. She just knows how to put them together to make one think. This book absolutely has adult content in it though, so if you're wary of that, you might want to steer clear. Otherwise, it was definitely a fun time. After that, I read a poetry collection, Graffiti by Savannah Brown. Now, I didn't know that I knew who Savannah Brown was, but after I read this poetry collection, I looked her up on YouTube, and it turns out I had watched some of her videos several years ago. This is a collection about being a young adult, growing pains, figuring out who you are, trying to get comfortable in who you are, trying to be comfortable with the world, and still having some things that you haven't figured out yet. There were a few poems in here that spoke to me. Most of them I didn't really care for, but I thought that it was a good time. Poetry always makes me think. It always kind of gets my brain turning crazy. My favorite poem from the collection was "The Only Things I Know to Be True," which is accompanied by this very cute illustration. 4 out of 5 stars. I'll definitely pick up more of her poetry in the future. The final book that I read in the month of July was Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This is a middle grade story that follows Sophie, a 12-year-old girl who's always felt a little bit out of place in the real world, and it turns out that she doesn't actually belong here. At the start of the story, Sophie is whisked away to the Elven realm where she truly belongs. This first installment in the series follows Sophie as she goes through her first year at this magical academy and tries to make friends, tries to find out where she fits in this new world. One thing that I really appreciated about this book is that it did talk quite a bit about family relationships, because when Sophie went to the Elven world, she had to leave her human family behind. Quite a lot of page time in this book was devoted to Sophie trying to find new people that felt like family, and Sophie missing her old family. Overall, I wasn't enamored by the book, but I thought that it was a good first book in a series. It definitely sets us up well for the rest of the series, which I believe is 7 or 8 books long. It's quite fun, quite easy to read, and just a good time. One other thing that I liked about this book was the description of some of the cities, because as the title suggests, there are lost cities in this series, and so we have cities like Atlantis, and it was just really fun to see the author's imaginings of these places. To give you a quick sneak peek into several books that will be on my August wrap-up, I was most of the way done with A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos and The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. So both of those books will be finished probably on the 1st or 2nd day of August. Alright friends, thank you so much to listening to all of the books that I read in the month of July. I'm really proud of my reading month. I thought that it was a great month. There were definitely some books in there that I loved, and a couple of books that I was kind of meh about, but that's okay, that's what happens, right? Based on my thoughts on these books, let me know down below what are some recommendations you have for me. Maybe I'll pick them up in August or September. Alright friends, until next time, I'm sending you love.